Hello everyone, Tom with Capo Fetish. A lighter shade of post-punk. Let's talk about some bands and albums that fit this theme. I'm going to start off here with a Dutch band. This is an album that came out in 1979. The band is called Grupo Sportivo. This came out on the Sire label. So this is the only album I own by Grupo Sportivo, and they're very quirky. Very kind of almost kind of like a Dutch version of the V-52s. Very quirky, very new wave-ish. They don't take themselves very seriously whatsoever. And I always thought these guys were like a one-off, but I looked at their discography and I cannot believe they have like a couple dozen albums in their repertoire. And then the group's leader, Hans Vandenberg, has like a dozen albums, like a dozen solo albums. So, I mean, this group, I never knew they were so prolific. I always thought when I got this album back in 80, 79, 80, I always thought, oh, this is just a one-off. But it's really, I was listening to some of it today. I haven't listened to it in decades, and it's quite good. Really well-written tracks, very smart lyrics, really cool stuff. So this is called Mistakes. Came out on the Sire label in 1979. Have a shitload of other albums to listen to. I gotta maybe explore their catalog down the line. Also included with this album is a 45 that has 6 more tracks on it called More Mistakes. So these guys are just cranking out tracks and albums from like the late 70s till now. So Grupo Sportivo, you might be able to find it in a 99-cent bin. The album is called Mistakes, and there's another 23 that you could probably find online as well. British band, Aztec Camera. Incredible folk pop act. I think they put out about 5 albums. This is their debut. This is an absolute classic record here called Highland Hard Rain. Lead singer, songwriter Roddy Frame writes fantastic tracks. This came out in 83. Probably their most famous track is on this album. It's called Oblivious. It got some substantial airplay on alternative radio back in 83. But every track on here is really good. This is very low-key, folk pop. You know, that's all I could say. The Boy Wonders, Walk Out to Winter, The Bugle Sounds Again, We Could Send Letters, Pillar to Post, Released, Lost Outside the Tunnel, Back on Board, and Down the Dip. This is a near perfect album released by Warner Brothers, 1983. I think they put 5 albums out. I have one other album. I think it's called Knife. I can't remember, but this is the one I always remember. And if I think of Aztec Camera, I think of this album. Fantastic stuff. All written by Roddy Frame. I think he's still releasing solo albums to this day. You know what it kind of reminds me of a little bit? That group Orange Juice. And I used to have a CD by Orange Juice, but I couldn't find it. I was going to include it in this video. But yeah, that kind of style, that kind of folk pop, a little bit of chime, you know, that kind of thing. There's not a whole lot of chime in here, but Orange Juice had a lot of chime. But anyway, great album. Highland Hard Rain by Aztec Camera from 1983. Some just great folk pop, great songwriting. Australian band, the Gobetweens. There's another fantastic kind of folky pop, clean sounding guitar band. This is their second album, Before Hollywood, that came out in 1983. Let me take out this booklet so you can see the cover. Here it is. There were 3 members in the band, the principal songwriters, Robert Forster and Grant McLennan. They were the guys responsible for most of the material. I forgot who the drummer is. I forgot what her name is, but they added a bass player. Now, this album is really fantastic. The track that is probably most well known on this album is called Cattle and Cane. It got some substantial video airtime on MTV back in the day, and it is just an incredible track. It's very kind of ethereal sounding. The guitars are really clean, and what's really cool about the Gobetweens, especially in this period, this early period of them, is that they're using really unconventional chording. There's a lot of stop and start kind of things going on in the songs. It's very unpredictable. It's not like, oh, you're going to hear a particular chord pattern and it's going to go to this pattern. It really changes things up. Very unique songwriting. Start with Cattle and Cane if you've never heard the Go-Betweens. But there's some other tracks on here that I absolutely love. One being the second track on side 1 called Follows You. Another one called On My Block. Of course, Cattle and Cane. It's just a really, really fine album. And this is a 2-disc set. The second side, or disc 2, has outtakes from these sessions. So I think Grant McLennan died a few years back. And, you know, I never saw this band live. I just discovered them maybe about 10 years ago. I hear there's an album called 16 Lovers Lane. I want to pick that up. There's a track on there called Streets of Your Town, which is a fantastic track. And I'm sure the rest of the album is good. And that came out in 1988. But this album right here is a great low-key post-punk classic. And it's called Before Hollywood. Even the hype sticker from Mojo. Brilliant. From Uncut Magazine. Exquisite. Poetic. Guitar Pop. The Ultimate Cult Band. NME says, a dream of what a pop group should be. So... Go-Betweens. I find myself definitely exploring more of their catalog. I think the next album I'm going to get is that 16 Lovers Lane album with Streets of Your Town. But anyway, Before Hollywood, if you've never heard it, check it out. Check out Cattle and Cane. It's an amazing track. We got to throw Squeeze in here. They put out some amazing singles in the late 70s, early 80s. Of course, the principal songwriters being Chris Difford and Glenn Tilbrook. At the time, they were kind of looked upon in the press as the new Lennon and McCartney. I think that's kind of stretching it a bit, but they had some fantastic singles. A few of my favorites being Pulling Muscles from the Shell. Is That Love really has kind of that Beatles kind of melody and vibe. You've got Tempted, bringing in Paul Carrack from the band Ace. They had a huge hit, one-hit wonder in the 70s called How Long. He stepped into Squeeze for a short time. Another one, Black Coffee in Bed, Annie Get Your Gun, Cool for Cats. Really cool band. Never saw these guys live, but I always loved their singles. This is their singles album that came out in 1982. Can't go wrong with this album. Squeeze, the singles album from 1982. And might as well throw these guys in here too. I mean, this band is pretty much the antithesis of bands like Joy Division during this period, and that is the B-52s, their debut. Fantastic debut. When I first heard this album, I really looked at them as kind of a novelty act, and yet they just continued. They kept going. I think they just finished touring for the very last time a few years back. Maybe there's still a few more dates that they need to fulfill, but I think they're pretty much done as a band. But man, they kept going. And there's one particular album I really liked by the B-52s, but I never owned. I worked at this job years ago, decades ago, where they kept playing the album Whammy. I think that album has a lot of great tracks. I also have their second album. I forgot what it's called, the red cover. But this one is like a classic, right? Rock Lobster. I remember the first time I heard that, thinking, wow, that's kind of different, you know? And then a few months later, it was all over the radio. I remember there was this girl in high school that would skip down the hall singing Dance This Mess Around. This brings back a lot of memories of high school, early high school, late junior high, Lava, Downtown, 52 Girls. Yeah, fantastic stuff here. B-52s, their debut from 79. Another band that was really out of time. This album came out in 1980. This is kind of like neo-psychedelia, like early on, right? And it features two really major players, Robin Hitchcock and Kimberly Rue, who would eventually form Katrina and the Waves. And they would have a huge hit with Walking on Sunshine. They also would write a song called, he would be part of the song called Going to Liverpool, which the Bangles covered. This band I'm talking about is the Sop Boys, and this classic album, Underwater Moonlight, came out in 1980. This album came out pretty much after the band split. Robin Hitchcock would form a very prolific solo career. I love a lot of Robin Hitchcock stuff. I love that album, Globe of Frogs. Love that album. But some of the key tracks on here, I Want to Destroy You. One of my favorites on here is called Queen of Eyes. That is such a great track. very neo-psychedelia. I mean, when you think about what was out in 1980, a lot of the post-punk, Joy Division and Susie and the Banshees, they're kind of taking a step back, throwing in those mid-60s elements. You can hear a lot of like Revolver-sounding kind of guitars on here. Kingdom of Love, Positive Vibrations, I Got the Hots, Insanely Jealous, Tonight, You'll Have to Go Sideways. This CD also has a lot of bonus tracks on it. Vegetable Man is great. Dreams, Black Cinnamon, Diamond Rock. This was released on the Ryko imprint. Ryko would put out so many cool reissues back in the early 90s. And I don't think they're around today anymore, but I always loved their kind of green jewel cases. I remember at one point they bought the entire Elvis Costello catalog. Now I think he's on a different label. He's been all over the place. Columbia, Ryko. Anyway, the Sop Boys, Underwater Moonlight is a classic. And if you've never heard the Sop Boys, pick this up. It's fantastic. Another one is New Zealand band Split Enz. Neil Finn, Tim Finn. Great stuff. I remember one of the earliest MTV videos I ever saw was I Got You from 1980. They also had another kind of a minor hit that I really dug to around the same time called Hard Act to Follow. That was really cool. And then, of course, 6 Months in a Leaky Boat. And, of course, Neil Finn would go on to form Crowded House, have huge success with that band. But Split Enz were really cool. They fit into the post-punk mode, but they also are a little bit of prog, a little bit of proggy before that. So they were kind of all over the map. Prog, and they were a little post-punk, and then new wave, whatever you want to call it, right? So Split Enz, this is a best of, really good. History Never Repeats, it's called. And then we got to throw this one in here too, from 1983. This is a band that was caught busking outside a Milwaukee sidewalk. And James Honeyman Scott, other Pretenders, lead guitarist, saw them busking, thought they sounded fantastic. In fact, Chrissy Hine invited them to play that night. The Pretenders were playing right down the street and had them play a little acoustic set before the Pretenders came on. And so they gained a little clout from James Honeyman Scott. The label Slash would sign them, and I'm talking about the first Violent Femmes album, which is just an absolute gem of an album. Very classic. It kind of reminds me of a more angry Jonathan Richman. You know, Jonathan Richman always has that kind of childlike kind of vibe, at least his solo stuff. This kind of is a more edgy kind of Jonathan Richman kind of vibe. Of course, Blister in the Sun, been played a bazillion times, right? Add It Up. Some of the cuts that don't get a lot of airplay are my favorites, though. I love Prove My Love. That is such a cool track. And then, of course, Gone Daddy Gone. To the Kill, Please Do Not Go is great. Just a flawless album. Great songs written by, what is his name? Gordon Gano. On bass player, it's Brian Ritchie. I remember seeing these guys back in 1999. There was this huge street fair at San Diego, the San Diego Street Fair. They were playing, and I remember Brian Ritchie saying, if anybody throws anything else up on this stage, we're leaving. Someone did, and they left. Then X came on and performed a set. So anyway, just an example of some really cool, another side of post-punk that is really not really talked about. When most people talk about post-punk, it's always the same band. Talking Heads, Joy Division, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I thought we'd do a little something different today and throw in some other post-punk bands that have different flavors. So anyway, if you have any more to add to the list, throw them in the comments section. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you dig the content across the channel, press subscribe. I'd appreciate it. And we will see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye.